it would never be something that I would ever pick, and I would never want to do anything different. I think the gift of giving all my sons now a brother or multiple brothers has really been life-changing, and it's allowed us to look, in a different direction as life. We will never, I don't want to say we'll never, but some of the things that we would have afforded a family of 4 are not afforded a family of 6. We don't sit in a booth. We don't stay in one hotel room. All things that, nobody ever thought of till you had 4 kids. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
Welcome to Waking Up to Life with Rabbi Josh, a podcast built around conversations with people in our community who have found a bit of enlightenment in their lives. While these events may not seem life-changing, I'm hopeful that our conversation will reveal how these times, these experiences have shaped the way my guests see the world. This informal conversation and insights from Jewish tradition, I hope will change your life as well. And if not, it's just 18 minutes with me. So, l'chaim, to life. Today we welcome Steve Ingber, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit. He's a friend and community leader, and I'm so glad to have you, Steve, on the show with me.
And thanks for having me here today, Josh.
So while your job is a Jewish communal leadership position, the story that you're going to share today is actually a very personal one. We've talked a little bit about it, and as a father of 4, there was a moment in your life when you sort of woke up and understood the world differently. So I hope you'll share a little of that story with our listeners.
Absolutely. And again, thanks for having me this morning. I'm a big believer in, man plans and God laughs. And when I say that is, I was sort of comfortable having 2 kids. My wife sort of wanted 3. And so I wasn't against it. I said, okay, let's do it. And God wanted us to have 4. And so there we go. Without getting into too much detail, things you'll never forget, the color of the wall, what you were wearing, is when your fertility doctor says, well, isn't this interesting? And lo and behold, my life was changed for forever. And we went from having 2 kids to knowing that we were going to be having 4 kids. Which for those of you who are always interested in a sports reference, it's no more man on man. Now it's zone defense, keeping everything in front of you. And look, it would never be something that I would ever pick, and I would never want to do anything different. I think the gift of giving all my sons now a brother or multiple brothers has really been life-changing, and it's allowed us to look, in a different direction as life. We will never, I don't want to say we'll never, but some of the things that we would have afforded a family of 4 are not afforded a family of 6. We don't sit in a booth. We don't stay in one hotel room. All things that, nobody ever thought of till you had 4 kids. And I wouldn't change it for anything.
So it's interesting to hear you talk and using your sports references. You actually field now a full basketball team of boys in your house. So I'm just interested, what was your actual reaction in the moment when the fertility doctor gave you that news?
Well, first of all, I can't say that, but it would be, whatever. Let's go with, oh, crap. And then it was, wow, is this really happening? And then it was more of an apology, because as my wife was looking for some comfort, I probably needed, and I'm very stoked, needed some time to come around to this. And I think she was looking for more of a excitement from me, and I was more sort of still processing it. So then I had to tell her, no, I was very excited. This is great news. But it took me a while to sort of realize what we were dealing with.
So fast forward, the youngest boys are now how old?
They're 8. They're 13, 10, and twin 8-year-olds. So we at one point in time had 5 under 5.
So at what point in that story, well, actually you just behave under 5, right? So
right. 4 under 5 plus me, right? Yes.
At what point in that story did things go from shock and awe to really seeing the world differently and understanding your role as a father and as a husband in a new way?
It was a high-risk pregnancy, and my wife spent the last 2 months of the pregnancy in the hospital. At which point in time we were building a house, and I was at home working with two. And then when the twins came, they spent some time in the NICU, and it was when we left the NICU that it really hit me that this is truly a blessing, because there are so many parents that were in the NICU before we were there, and we're going to be there after. And yes, we all have trials and tribulations and things that go wrong in our lives, but there's always somebody worse, and you really need to learn to look at the positives from this. And it's only positives, and really, again, wasn't what I was planning and wouldn't change it. And I think realizing how blessed I am to have 4 healthy young boys, it's just, my life is busy, but I wouldn't change it for the world. And it was that time of watching my wife take both of them out of the NICU for the last time, because one left early and came back and forth. But when they both left, it was, wow, we are truly blessed, and we have a big, big family.
So you referenced it earlier. You're playing zone defense now as parents, but I would argue that as a leader in our Detroit Jewish community, playing zone defense is also a great analogy for the way you serve as a professional. So talk a little bit about that. How has this family lesson affected the way that you've chosen to lead this community?
I think it's shown me that, again, there are so many things going on in the world, and it's finding the good and accentuating the good while trying to fix, the not so good. And it's also realizing that when things don't go your way, doesn't necessarily mean it's not for the better. There's a Garth Brooks song, or I think it was Garth Brooks, one of God's greatest gifts is unanswered prayers. And not that I was ever against having 4 kids, but it wasn't on my radar. And now look what it's brought me. And really that sort of lyric, I think, really frames what I'm giving. So when something doesn't work out the way that you thought, or the way that you planned, or the way that you wanted, doesn't mean it's not for a higher cause. And let's just see where, life takes you. And really, I think, when you can look back at it, it's easy to say looking back at it, but when you're dealing with something, it's a little bit harder. But that's how I always like to look at it.
And we're experiencing that right now in the world with the war raging across the universe from us. Mm-hmm. We in Detroit respond and find ways to make good out of a terrible situation. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what the Jewish community is doing now here in Detroit and around the world.
Sure. So obviously the war in Ukraine is very upsetting to all of us. There are what we believe an estimated about 200,000 Jews who were living in Ukraine up until February 24th. Many have begun to flee either eastward or straight outside the country, some going as far as making Aliyah. The Jewish community in Detroit, as of this recording, has raised over $4 million that has gone to help the Jews and people in Ukraine and surrounding areas. And it really goes to show you that while there is bad in the world and, nobody wants what's happening, to see our community, local community, stepping up for people that they've never met, will never meet, and, won't affect their daily life, but saying, Hineni, here I am, and standing up as Jews and being for all Jews, no matter where they are. And I really am super proud to lead what we've done in our community so far.
I cannot help but be reminded of one of my favorite rabbinic teachings, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lezeh. We all of Israel is responsible, all of the Jewish people are responsible for everyone else in our community. And you are living that out in your professional life right now, bringing that kind of aid to people who need it. I'm wondering, have you started thinking, or have we started thinking as a community about what is next? And is there a plan being developed to take care of refugees around the world and here in our own community?
So yes, we have. But the biggest unknown is, what is that? When is it? And what is it? are all these refugees who are currently living in Moldova or Romania or Germany or wherever going to go back to Ukraine? Will there be anything to go back to? Will they all emigrate to Israel? Will they, try and just find another place in Europe? And also what's not being talked about is the Jews that are left in Russia. Currently, the ruble is through the floor, and those who are living comfortably are no longer. And so we'll also have to do something for the Jews there. There's roughly, again, a couple 100,000 Jews still living in Russia, and even some in Belarus. And what does that mean for the Jews? And again, like you said, better than I can, is we're all responsible for this. So, that's what I pride our federation on doing. And we learned this during COVID. While we may not know what's coming next, we know we will be ready. And that's the beauty of having a strong Jewish community and a strong federation. I don't want this to be a sales pitch, but it's because we were in Ukraine, not only last month, 6 months, last year, 10 years ago. The Jews in Detroit have been taking care of Jews in Kyiv for the last 25 years. We run a special program with the JDC and bringing much needed aid to Holocaust survivors in Kyiv. So when it came time to switch to help all Jews, we were simply ready to do that. And we had people there on the ground.
Yeah, and I'm okay with the shameless plug for Federation. I sit on the partnership region committee, and the communities of our region in Central Galilee also have a large population of Russian immigrants to Israel. And the work that Federation has been doing there has been supporting this community and building relationships so that the work that we need to do now is easier and will be easier in the future. And I know that's important to you and to our entire community.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and actually right now, some of the Ukrainian refugees are being housed in a hotel in our partnership region until we can figure out, sort of permanent housing. But again, when you say, how are we planning going forward? Is this another week, another day, another year? I don't know. And that's really making this whole thing a little bit harder to deal with.
So I want to draw the two subjects together a little bit. You talked about this enlightenment moment when you realized you were going to be the father of 4 and how it changed your outlook on the world. I'm interested, you've been in your current position for just a short time. What is perhaps one of the most important lessons that you've learned from the work that you're doing as the CEO of Federation?
Again, that it's finding sort of the blessing in life. And, while I say it was an aha moment going from 2 to 4 kids or realizing that we were going to have 2 more, the moment is like, that was a blessing. There was no downside about it. It just wasn't, it was like, whoa, it was really a aha moment. And I think as I do things in Federation here, it's really, it's how can we have everything be good? How can we find the good in everything and continue to move forward? And I think it's so important that we really always, and I've had this all my life, and I've learned from my father and my grandfather to always have a positive attitude. I'm a big believer in, you don't get to play you don't get to pick the cards you're dealt, but you get to play them, and it's how you play them. And I think that's it. And it's standing up and saying, here's what I'm going to do, and here's how I'm going to make the world a better place today. And I can tell you that my 4 kids, I have such pride in that they are making the world a better place. Just today, one of my children has announced that he's raised over $1,500 to send to Jews in Ukraine by making a keychain on a 3D printer that he got a couple months back. And so really it's, it's leading by example and showing them, we're here not just for your brothers and not just for your parents, but for, like you said, Kol Yisrael, all of the Jews and all of the world for that matter. And the fact that we're living and doing it gives me such a sense of pride.
It's amazing. First of all, congratulations to him. That's an amazing story. Mm-hmm. As I was listening to you talk, something occurred to me. Your career has been one that has shifted and changed over time. You went from the business world to the nonprofit world. You're talking about being able, as a Jewish community, to shift and change and to evolve. That is such an important lesson that really everybody can take away from. We have to be open and willing to see new opportunities, take the risks that are associated with them, but also, it's the most important thing you've shared, see the blessings. once you've taken those momentary changes in life.
And it's even more knowing that the blessing is coming. Look, I can tell you honestly, for between me, you, and whoever else hears this podcast, 6 or 7 years ago, I never thought me and you would be having this discussion. I was in the for-profit world. I was doing just great. Life was great. Things happen, and at the time, they're very disruptive, good, bad, or indifferent. But then it's, where you go from there. And I tell people this all the time. This is the best job I never knew I wanted. And I'm loving what I'm doing. And this was never on my radar. I had to make a resume to even be accepted to apply for this job. I had always worked for myself, so I never even had one. And really, it just goes to show you that good is everywhere, and you've got to find it. And while, people have bumbles and steps and trips and such, it's, we're a community, and we'll get through this, and you'll get through this. Whatever the problem that is arising, tomorrow is a new day, and that's the way you got to look at it. And it's a good day.
And we spoke about this privately. I feel really blessed to have you now as a community leader, but also as a friend. And that's something, again, that would have possibly never happened were it not for the changes that we accept in our lives. And Detroit is truly lucky. Our Detroit Jewish community is truly blessed to have you as our leader, one of our leaders, and a partner through Federation Synagogue relationships, Federation agency relationships. You are really making us proud every single day.
Thank you. And I think, look, the most important words you meant there was partner. I believe that's Federation's role. People say, well, what does Federation do? And the 18-minute podcast wouldn't be enough time to do that. But what I like to say in 30 seconds or less is that we're here to make sure that every other Jewish nonprofit, synagogue, temple, agency or non-agency is here to do good, because people need help, and they don't care how it's funded or who put it together or who's on what board. And so my goal is to make sure that every one of these organizations is here to be able to do what we need to do when we need to do it.
Amazing, amazing. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast, and there is something that I've asked each of my guests to share in these closing moments. It has to do with nothing about what we've talked about already. It's a personal question to you, but is there something right now that you are reading or watching or have seen on Netflix that has really changed your outlook, and maybe you could recommend to all of the people listening?
That's interesting. I would never want to comment on what I watch because it's pretty crappy television. I mean, let's be honest. I get very little time to sort of decompress, and I go to places that probably I'm embarrassed to publicly admit I watch.
Well, and offline, we can talk about what your guilty pleasure television is.
Yeah. And it's usually falling asleep while my wife picks some sort of reality show that really is just, yeah. Actually, I'm going to go with a book I read over the summer, and it was Noah Tishby's book on Israel. And I think it's because for the first time that I can remember, it brought Israel, I don't want to say to the masses, but it broke it down to a really, not a intellectual debate about Israel. There's many things about Israel, and it's not enough time in this podcast again, but I think breaking it down and sort of reading it just at a low level is really important, and not going to all the historical and this is why I believe this, and really reading it from a different perspective, I think was really enlightening. And it really, I would recommend that everybody read it. It's an easy read. It's a quick read. It's a fun read. And it really, I wouldn't say changed my outlook, but it allowed me to really talk openly and freely about the issues in Israel.
100%. I could not agree with you more. It's a great book. And I'll plug that on May 15th of this year, Noah Tishby is coming here to Temple Israel, where she will share some of the insight from her book as a major speaker in our TI for Israel programming. So a great recommendation. And I'm glad you read the book, and actually glad that you've shared that with everybody today. Mm-hmm. So here we are. We've arrived at the end of our podcast. Thank you again, Steve Ingber, the CEO of the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit, for being on the show. I hope everybody listened today and heard something that will help you to wake up to life. If not, you didn't take too much time with us today, but I hope it has made a difference. We're excited to see you on future episodes. Again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Steve.
And thank you, Rabbi. And more importantly, I want to do a shameless plug. Thank you to my wife, who puts up with her 5 kids, as she likes to refer to them. And she's really the one that makes this all happen.
Spectacular. Have a great day. Wake up to life, everybody.